welcome to DnDTime Talks, where we discuss all things Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Pete.
I'm Jeremy. Pete, how are you on this lovely Wednesday after afternoon, but before night?
See, I'm
unless you're in a place where it's night.
Unless you're where I am, in which case, yes.
In fact, I'd say most of the country is in night now.
I think we're going to be moving kind of into a time when it's not necessarily night at this. Actually, it's always going to be night at this time. Who am I kidding? 9:30. It's always going to be night where I am.
It's sunny out.
Yeah, it's sunny out. We're getting those longer days, which feels very good. That makes me very happy. So I guess I'm okay, all things said and done. What about you, Jeremy? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I know I promised you guys on Sunday I was going to get my drink after the break. The break was a little longer than I expected, but I've got my rum and Coke. So.
Yeah, that is
a very long break between Sunday and now.
And hello to everyone hanging out here in chat. I see Reflected 10A, D Forgotten One, Vassals Aju, Farco, Sword, Co here, and I'm sure several others that lurk beneath the surface, hiding, waiting for their moment.
Beneath the shadows?
Yes.
Waiting to strike.
Precisely. Yeah, and hello to all of you. Thank you all for coming out and getting ready to talk about some D&D related topics along with us.
Yeah, Pete, are you ready to talk about today's topic?
I feel
like you could really think about this topic a lot.
Do you mean
a very good topic for you to talk about?
Me particularly?
I'm just jabbing you.
Oh, you were memeing me. I thought you were saying that as a compliment, meaning that
no,
Pete, you're always growing you're always growing and improving and striving to be the best dungeon master you can be. Which, yeah, I absolutely am, and yes, I'm also for that reason very excited to talk about today's topic. I think this is going to be an interesting one. I'm interested to hear hear some of your strategies as well. I just heard Skype make a beeping noise. Is there something wrong?
Oh yeah, hey, your Skype is gone.
Once again, I'm in the worst.
Pete, this hasn't happened in so long. Guys, take your screenshots of Pete now before he comes back.
I think I'm back.
Yeah, he's back now. You missed your shot.
You've missed your chance. I'm sure
because we haven't said it explicitly. Our topic this evening is going to be improving as a dungeon master. We're going to be talking about, having a healthy mindset, kind of reading the room, getting to know your players a little bit, experimenting and how to feel out, trying new things, how to deal with failing, and all of that good stuff. So, and bad stuff. I mean, there's lots of bad stuff in improvement because sometimes you fail.
Yeah, for certain. But
it's all good. It's weird.
Yeah, tackling those kind of problems and overcoming your own kind of failures and limitations, that's how you get better at it. And so a lot of those times those failures can be your biggest learning experiences. But I think we'll get into that in a little bit.
My cat is right here screaming at me.
Yeah, I can hear Data just howling at the top
right
of
here.
his lungs.
Data, go to work. Okay, see, I had to shame him, and now he'll go to work.
Yes. And always, before we hop into our topic proper, if you have thoughts upon the subject, your own tips and tricks for how to improve as a dungeon master, make sure you toss them in chat there, as we'll be monitoring as we go forward. And
Absolutely.
If you just have unrelated questions for myself and Jeremy, make sure you post those on our Discord server, which is linked below in the Ask Pete and Jeremy section, because we will answer those at the end of stream in our Ask Pete and Jeremy segment, per the usual. Want to bring us in, Jeremy?
Well, before that, one last quick thing. If any of you guys have specific questions about how you can improve on something specific, especially if we aren't covering it, seemingly, ask in the chat. We'll, this is the kind of subject that we can kind of take little tangents here and there to answer specific questions like, I'm having trouble with the pacing of combat. How do I get better at that kind of thing? Feel free. That's stuff that it's good to talk about. Oh my goodness, he's being a brat. Let's jump into our subject.
Great.
So, improving as a DM. I'm gonna guess, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most people in this chat and in the world in general have tried to be good at something at some point in their lives. Um, and I don't know about you, but for me, the big thing I was always told was practice. Practice, you try it over and over again. Practice makes perfect. You're gonna do good.
I think that's a pretty fair wager, and I also think that that is a pretty fair assessment of what most people's ground level advice on how to get better at something is.
Yeah. So obviously, it also applies to D&D. The more you practice, the better you're gonna get. Um, the more you DM, you get more opportunities to improve, and that is just a fact, right? You're not going to make mistakes and learn without doing it more. So if you're the kind of person that's afraid to DM and you want to watch all the YouTube videos in the world to like, I must become a masterclass dungeon master before I try DMing. No, that's not how you learn. It helps. Don't get me wrong. Watching this kind of stuff can help you. But doing it is the best way to get it, like to understand it.
Absolutely. I know that in my own experience, when I first started DMing, like there were so many things that I could never have accounted for that were going to go wrong, that you just can't understand and get the picture of until you try and do it. But I think one of the big things about practicing, Jeremy, is that, and I think this is going to be one of the main things we're going to be talking about, is practicing is great, and the more experience you get, you're going to naturally get better by doing something over and over again. But in a lot of ways, I think you can accelerate that process and get more out of your sessions if you actively think about how you're going to run your games and what you're going to be getting out of each session, and how that's going to help you improve. Going in with this kind of mindset of, I want to grow and improve as a DM into every kind of session that you run.
Exactly. And I think contrary to a lot of, for example, like a musical instrument, if you're trying to learn to play a musical instrument, practice actually, like that you will become better by practicing it more. That is just a fact of the matter there. There's a correct way to do it, and if you practice that correct way, you're going to get better.
Yep.
That's not always such an easy distinction in Dungeons and Dragons or in any kind of social game. There's not one single correct way to do it. Lots of different people and parties and groups of players and of characters, right? They have fun in different ways. And for one group, what might be fun might suck for another one. That doesn't make their fun wrong. So unlike just a musical instrument, right? You need this mindset, and you need to have a bit more of an awareness of what you're trying to do than. And I'm not saying it's easy to learn a musical instrument, God forbid, but
it is not.
It is not at all. But it's a little less mechanical. Despite the fact that D&D is governed by rules, it's adjudicated by a subjective party, and that's what the Dungeon Master. So, talking about mindset, Pete, what do you think is the best way to kind of jump in, right? How to prepare, I guess you could say, for a game?
Yeah, so I think for starters, and this is just a great way to begin kind of shifting your perspective and how you think about DMing and how you're going to improve at it. Before you go into each session, think about what it is that you want to be better at in each session. In part of your preparation for building things, you're gonna do all your regular D&D prep. You're gonna have your NPCs. You're gonna map out your dungeons. Do whatever it is that you personally like to do. But also think about, what is it that I really want to shine and bring to the table that I've never brought to the table before as a DM? And you can look to a lot of different places for that. You can think about what some of your weaknesses have been in the past. You can think a lot of the time, like Jeremy was saying before, maybe the pacing of your combat tends to be kind of slow and it gets dragged down a little bit. So you think, all right, in this session, what am I going to do to improve that and to speed up my combat and to make it more tense and dramatic? And you can apply that mindset to anything, any kind of minor detail or any tool in the proverbial DM's toolbox. That could be something like, I want to be more descriptive and really like immerse my players more in the environments that I describe. That could be, I want my NPCs to feel a little bit more alive and to feel like they really have weight and context in the world. whatever it is that you decide, go into that session with that clear mindset that like, I'm going to do this really well, or to the best of the ability that I'm capable of. And then when you do that, and either, whether it works or does not, you start to kind of hone that skill until ideally, eventually, in focusing on it, it becomes second nature, so you can focus on other things while doing that great.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially if you're new. If you're a new dungeon master, or even if you're an old dungeon master that maybe has some bad habits, which we all do.
Absolutely.
If you don't think you do, you do. So rethink that. But especially if you're a new dungeon master, I think it's really, really important to pick something, whether it be, it's something that you find out your characters like your players enjoy. So if you play for the same group of 4 people and you're pretty new and you find out, wow, these players really enjoy combat, focus on making your combats more interesting and more exciting, and really focus on that for a while, because it's going to be easier to hone that skill if your players are really, really into it. Likewise, if your players are really, really into NPCs, well, you focus on making your NPCs more interesting, more fleshed out, etc. You're going to just find it easier when you're trying to work with your players down the same kind of path. Then, if you're trying to make really interesting combats with a party that just does not give a damn about combat, you're going to find yourself confused and like unsure whether or not you did well. And that's an interesting kind of point there, right? Because I feel like at the end of the session, you really need to consider how it went.
Yep. I think that's the next big step there. And also, hello to Game Masters, Vault, and Diadems. Hi guys, welcome tonight.
We're talking about being a better dungeon master.
Yeah, I like that almost simultaneous hello back and forth that they did. That's a very nice synergy they had there. Anyway, as you were saying, I got a little distracted there. At the end of each section, absolutely, you should reflect back on what it is that you did and think about how the session went. Think about what went well, what went poorly, and consider how you're going to correct those things in the past. Think like, what went wrong? What could I have done? Like, if I could repeat the situation over again, what small thing as a DM could I have said or done that would have set the game on a better path? If there was a mistake. If everything went great, you can also just say, all right, that was perfect. I loved that. I'm going to start incorporating that and do it every single time if I can.
Yeah, exactly. Focus not just on what went wrong. I notice especially, a lot of people that might be more insecure. I mean, I have this problem for a very long time, and I still have this problem especially when things don't go well. Always I try to find, when I finish up a session, I try and think back of what's at least one thing that went well. Even if it was, all right, shopping went expediently and no one got bored. Even if that's the only thing that went well, and like the players fought and their characters murdered each other and everyone's angry and the group disbands, at least I can look back at one thing and say, hey, at least that worked. So always try and find, no matter how badly a session goes, one thing that goes really well. And, obviously look at at least one thing that didn't go so well that maybe you can improve on.
And I think that's just like a great, healthy way to think about the game. Having those kind of like positive attitudes can be a lot more important. I think that's something that's underestimated very frequently. Going in with like a good mindset, like, I'm going to improve. I'm probably going to make mistakes at some times, but I'll get through them and, I'll see what I can learn from them. Having that mindset is one of the most important ways. It's really hard, to do that a lot of the time, especially for newer DMs.
I think there's a great point in here from the Game Master's Vault. If everything that goes well was nothing you did, there's a problem. And I think what you're getting at, right, is if everything goes super well, then you're missing something. Right? Then you're probably missing something that probably could have been improved upon. And I think this kind of leads up to our next kind of talking point. Obviously, introspection, right, and reflection and trying to think over how it went yourself is helpful. Especially if you're recording your games like in the streamed environment here, it's easy to go back and watch. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you don't have that kind of benefit, or you maybe just don't even have the time to go back and watch a 4 or 5 hour game, and you're just trying to think about it, it can be a little like, man, what could I have improved upon? And a great way to figure that out, if you can't quite nail it down, or if maybe you're not sure if they enjoyed it, if you watch our video on player type archetypes from a while back, there are certain players that are hard to read. And a really great way to do that is to start an open dialogue with them. Talk to your players. Ask them at the end of each game, or maybe in between sessions is a better time, because I don't know about you people, but after like a 5-hour game, I'm pretty tired. I don't want to talk about stuff. Or I'm so hyped from what happened at the very end that everything else is just kind of a blur in the moment.
Yeah, I guess it very much depends on the game. And I think a lot of the time also, because when you're playing and you're speaking to your friends about this, you're probably playing with your buddies, or you're playing with a group of people that aren't actively trying to hurt your feelings. So when you ask your players, usually, Jeremy is one of those brutally honest players who at the end of it, like, oh man, that session went terrible. Which not my bad. That's players, be more like Jeremy.
Don't be as much like Jeremy.
Have no fear.
A little bit of bashfulness.
Maybe there's a middle ground you can find between myself, who would probably never say anything was wrong in the session, but 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to hear one of your friends, because I think most people err on the side of not wanting to be mean, say something like, "Oh, I had fun," and if everyone says that, that's fine. It means that things are going probably okay, because if things go very wrong or things are way off, you can you'll be able to notice those differences. If every week they say, "Oh yeah, it was fun," and then that one bad week you go, "Yeah, it was okay," you'll know that there was something different. In the same regard, when players do have something to say, make sure you really listen to it and hone in on it, especially if it's someone who usually doesn't respond.
Yeah, and a lot of this, you don't even necessarily have to ask, especially if things go well, right? Just listen to what people are talking about, in breaks in between. Let's say you take a 15, 20-minute snack break or bathroom break in your session, and people are all excited and talking about this cool new magic item they found. Oh, wow, hey, look, that's something that's interesting to them. But why is it interesting? Are they interested because it's powerful? Are they interested because it's cool, got cool lore? And you can only figure that stuff out, right, by seeing what they're talking about. Are they interested in the cool story that has to do with this item, an NPC that it belongs to they need to get? Are they interested in some other, like, deeper mystery in it? Or it could be an NPC instead of a magic item, or an enemy, or they just completed a quest or discovered a place, or anything. Listening to what players have to say is one of the best ways to learn that. And just asking someone directly, it's really hard sometimes for a player to think of, like, well, what did I like? But if you just listen a little bit as a dungeon master, you can find out very easily what it is. You just got to be actively paying attention. And that kind of goes into what we were talking about before, right? Of go in with a mindset where you're trying to improve on something, and then when you introduce that something, see how they react.
I absolutely agree with that, Jeremy. And this also falls into, this isn't something that has to be in part of your reflection. You can be kind of picking up on these things in game, because there are a lot of subtle hints that your players will tell you that you're doing a good or a bad job. And that can just be level of engagement. Like Jeremy was talking about, they're really excited about, say, the new magic item they got. But maybe it's just, when they're in the combat and they're really hanging on every single dice roll, or they're just kind of rolling and saying their attacks and the opposite thing. They're just like, all right, yeah, I hit it for 15 damage. And that player, I mean, they're playing the game and they're participating, but they're not really excited about what's going on. But when you see them kind of roll the dice and everyone's watching the dice roll happen, and then they get their 2 on their dice roll, and everyone just like, oh no, and throws their hands up in the air and kind of rolls their heads back. rolls their heads back, you know that they're like excited and really kind of engaging in what you're doing.
Yeah, and some great comments coming in from the chat. Sword Go here saying, go in expecting that your players are going to completely jack with your story. That is the best advice. I mean, stick with that, guys. You know, if you go into a game expecting to work, oh man, I'm going to really work on my NPCs because I think I just really want to work on that. And the player's like, yeah, we're going to make a treehouse in the forest. And you're just, what the fuck, guys? There's a town right over there. And they're like, yeah, I know. We don't want to go to the town. And you're like, I wanted to practice my NPCs. Well,
but the wizard said you should go there, though.
Yeah, and it's a kind of deal, right? Don't be afraid to switch gears. You know, if the players take your plans and completely go into left field with it, that's fine. That happens like all the time. That's just part of the game. And you know, you can still work on your NPCs. Maybe introduce a druid that they meet, or maybe a wild animal that just befriends them.
Game Master's Vault is on the exact same page as you there. A treehouse made of NPCs. Exactly.
Perfect. You know, and like, you can always make sure to adapt, right? Don't try and force what you want to do if your party goes and does something else. And yeah, I mean, that's just an important part of being a good dungeon master, is learning to be adaptable, right?
Yeah, that's great general advice. And I think in the same regard, though, just as it's important to learn to be flexible, and if you're like used to running very kind of strict and prepared, to learn how to kind of, you know, improvise and adapt. I think the same is also true. If you're used to like running everything by the seat of your pants, I think you can also gain a lot from taking some time and really fleshing out maybe an area that you're pretty sure that they're going to go to soon, and taking that kind of opposite approach if that's what you're used to. And I think that this kind of is segging us into what I think is the biggest part of improving as a dungeon master, and that is like stepping out of your comfort zones.
Absolutely. A lot of people just don't want to step out of their comfort zone. They are afraid to. They're afraid they're going to mess up and it's going to suck and everyone's going to hate it and no one will want to play with them ever again and everything's going to be terrible and they're going to murder you in your sleep. And no, none of that's going to happen. The worst case scenario is it goes poorly and your player's like, that was whack. What were you going for? Like, what were you trying? You're like, I was trying to do a thing. I don't know. And, you know, it's fine. You shrug it off, you move on. Experimentation is super, super important to improving. And being willing to experiment, right?
Yep.
Just because something was a failure in the moment doesn't make it a failure for you getting better as a DM. I have had countless, innumerable failures in my time DMing. And that's
failed
why,
in every game I've ever DM'd. I've made a mistake.
And yeah, absolutely. And that's why I've become, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but like a pretty decent dungeon master. Is I fucked up a lot. And I learned from those mistakes, mostly. I still make some of them. Those are bad habits. And that's something that when you I don't want to get too off topic from experimentation. We'll talk about bad habits in a minute, but you got to learn to experiment, to go outside your comfort zone. And a great way to do that, and Pete, I think you got a little bit to say about this, is different genres. I know you're a lover of genre.
I am. That's a fair point. I love trying out different kind of tones, and I think experimenting with the kind of tone of your game is a great way to put yourself in a different mindset when DMing. I've run, you know, a lot of different really extreme genres. I've done a lot of, you know, horror D&D kind of in some of my private groups. I've tried a lot of like a lot of more like kind of philosophical and science fiction-y kind of stuff, even within the framework of D&D. I've done a lot of different genres which allow you to tell different stories and learn to react to new kind of situations that are ongoing. You can do a lot of different stuff by just experimenting on the base ground level with what kind of story that you're trying to tell. But in the same kind of regard, Jeremy, what about just like, the pillars of gameplay? I think you can mix things up quite a lot there as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so let's talk about the pillars of gameplay. We're not going to go into super extensive detail here because that's a whole topic in itself. But the 3 pillars of gameplay in 5e is defined, I think it's in the player's handbook. It's probably also in the Dungeon Master Guide. Are exploration, social encounters, and combat. And I think you can totally experiment with that too. As you see all the time in DnDTime, we will experiment with funky or different or out of the box ways of doing combat.
Oh yeah.
We've done combat with like timers, with like skill challenges baked in, where throughout the combat you have to succeed on 5 actions before 3 rounds has passed to disable the bomb or it will explode. We did like an actual like timer in the first myth tier battle against the Bitter Witches, I believe they were called. I don't think they were the Bitter Sisters.
The Bitter Sisters. It was the Bitter Sisters.
I think we called them the Bitter Witches.
It's a coven of 2, and I'm pretty sure they were the Bitter Sisters.
Well, they were the Bitter Sisters. We named that adventure, or in the write-up, they're the Bitter Witches. Regardless, the point is, you can try out combats in new and exciting and absurd ways. I mean, I've run a combat encounter where the entire combat was you're falling. And there's a combat encounter with a monster that is also falling alongside you. You can try strange and bizarre different ways to spice things up. Gravity and how physics apply in your adventure is another cool way to spice up, especially puzzles, right?
I was about to say a couple of personal experiences I've had just in the context of DnDTime. 2 of my favorite bosses I've run, Riddle Boy and the Rhyme Slime, both revolved around very kind of funky player interaction mechanics, where Riddle Boy, in order to damage Riddle Boy, you had to be able to solve one of his riddles first. And the entire boss fight was built around this strange kind of mechanic of solving riddles. And in order to damage the Rhyme Slime, you had to rhyme at him, where it was like a heavily role-playing based combat. And, the first one was more puzzly, the second one more role-playing, where you had to kind of engage in these specific ways as like a gateway to even like get into the fight.
Yeah, and I mean, Game Master's Vault, I did 0G combat in my last session. Yeah, that's another really interesting way adjusting, because combat almost always in 5e is in 2 dimensions. Adding that 3rd dimension, or hell, a 4th dimension, it's technically a 3rd dimension, but underground, right? Or underwater, adding that to the mix are really interesting ways that you can experiment and try new things with combat. Another kind of situation you can do, right? Is exploration.
Yeah.
And, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there are rules for extreme hot, extreme cold, in terms of weather conditions. And if you're using those all the time, a lot of people might find that kind of strenuous or kind of like, oh, this is obnoxious to keep track of and it's overbearing. But some parties will really love that. Some players will be like, this is awesome. This feels like a survival thing. Like, we're really struggling to just survive in this world, and it feels so rewarding just getting from town to town. And some people love that. And you'll never know that if you never try it once, right? And maybe your first time you try it is up in the mountains. Go for it. They're up in the high peaks of the mountains. They're probably not going to come back up here again. Use the world, or make up some of your own of what traversing these avalanche-ridden peak mountaintops are like. And that's a cool way to make exploration feel a lot more engaging, because it's one of the 3 core things of the game is exploring and finding lost and hidden things. So,
and if you usually take a very descriptive and very kind of intense look at exploration, where you're frequently describing environments, having players make choices here and there, maybe try like a more tactical and very rote version of exploration to see if it's something that you enjoy and that your players have fun with. Like, and when I say that, I mean like something like a hex crawl, where they have a map and you just have them kind of walk over little segments on it, and they're just basically moving through environments, and you kind of tell them what happens in each chunk, and
oftentimes
maybe you have an encounter.
Yeah, oftentimes when you're doing a hex crawl like that, rather than like a lot of dungeon masters really prep everything and know where everything is, it just has a bunch of tables to randomly generate what's in each square. And that's a really cool way, that hex crawl that he was talking about, using tables to figure out what's in each square as you go. Awesome way to find out, like, oh man, what is here? Like, to figure it out and then improvise and roll with it to practice being adaptable. I love that. It's just another awesome idea.
Yeah, for certain. And then, like, what about the our third pillar, our kind of role-playing pillar? What can you do to kind of mix things up there?
There's one other thing I really love about exploration, right?
Oh, please, sorry to.
And this is just like, if you have a really creative party, and it's something that you can't do with every group because they just might not care about it. But if you're setting up an environment that is going to be important, but you want to really practice improvising on your own, you can say you're in a forest and then ask your players what is around you in this forest. And that's just a really exciting prompt to A, engage your players, and B, oh shit, I don't know what's here now. They could say anything. They could say there's a nest of giant wasps, and I'd have to roll with that, right? And that's cool. And it's a fun way to, like, every so often engage your players in an exciting way.
And that's something that, as a new DM, that might be like a little bit intimidating the first time that you do it.
Oh, yeah.
And also, if you're not an experienced DM, that kind of thing has a reasonable probability of just like it doesn't work out and things get a little bit weird for a while. But that's okay. Lean into those kind of situations. If things don't go the way you plan it, learn from it. Enjoy the experience, see what you kind of got out of it. Maybe try and find a silver lining and think of something cool that came out of doing it, even if it was just kind of you building some confidence from stepping out of your comfort zone.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I love what you just said. If things get weird, just lean into it. It's great. If you want to work on your NPCs, and you are, the players go to this abandoned town, and there's the one sketchy farmer on the outskirts of town, and your intent is to make this guy kind of creepy and be like, yeah, the town's been abandoned for years. And you're trying to be that, it's supposed to be scary, and your players start cracking up. Lean into it, make him goofy, right? Lean into these things that don't go super well. If your big intimidating villain is supposed to be intimidating and the players are just like, oh, okay, that's fine. That's totally cool. Just roll with it. And it works. It works really well, actually. I mean, a great example, I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this or will watch this at any point have watched Critical Role to some variety. A great example in Critical Role from their first season is Thordak, their big one of their big enemies.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say too much more in case you haven't watched it, but when he was kind of one of the first big enemies that shows up, big enemies. And when he showed up, the players are just not really, they didn't get it. They weren't really that scared of him. His motives were weird, and it was just kind of like, all right, we don't really get this subtle plotting that you're trying to hint at. Kind of the web of intrigue didn't really click. It was just suddenly he's bad. And here, and Matt Mercer, the dungeon master there, leaned into that and just made him kind of crazy. He's just kind of mad, just mad dragon. And it worked. I mean, was it the most exciting battle we've ever seen? No. But for an enemy that, was supposed to be this big, intimidating mastermind, right? Matt leaned into he's just insane and really old. And he's just powerful because he's a really old dragon. And I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So it's, even the best DMs kind of can flounder at things like that, especially when it comes to big, bad enemies. So don't be afraid to, adapt and play it off a little bit of a different way and lean into what's going on, especially if your players are getting confused. Say, yeah, you should be confused because look, he's crazy. And then they're like, oh, that's why I didn't get it. Even if it was supposed to be a secret plot that you were going to unveil that they just never got.
This is something that worked really well for me. when I was first kind of learning how to DM and trying to actively improve. Because I remember actually when we first started our last campaign, Jeremy, I messaged you and the people that we're playing with, and my message in the chat was, I want to get better at DMing, so I want to run this campaign for you guys. That's going to be very off the rails and kind of experimental. And my plan for that campaign was I would prep a bunch of dungeon maps and then run each session with no plan, completely improvised. And it ran that way for some time. And I learned so much about DMing from doing something I hadn't done, because the previous campaign I had run had been, extremely prepared. I'd spent it was like the first campaign I'd ever ran. I spent like an entire summer like hashing out all of these like tiny details that I had no idea would not matter even the slightest bit. And so the second time I did the exact opposite, and I learned so much from that.
Absolutely. And you can see a lot of that actually if you go back and watch some of our DnDTime Delves videos, especially the prep videos, right? A lot of those is I get the dungeon, and it's like, all right, let's figure out what's in this dungeon that's pre-generated. And, figuring that out ahead of time versus beforehand, it doesn't really matter too much.
Ahead of time versus beforehand.
I mean, if you figured out beforehand, right? I'm sorry, ahead of time versus improv. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously improv is harder. Actually, improv is almost easier, I think. Once you get used to it.
Yes and no, for certain.
It can be, not for new players, but the more experienced you get, the easier it is to improv. And actually, that's a funny thing. Getting back on topic about going outside your comfort zone. For me, going outside my comfort zone was, running modules. The thing that they kind of expect all players, right? When you play 5e, you get the starter kit. It's like $20 on Amazon, and it comes with a module and some basic rules and a bunch of character sheets. That's how they expect people to play, and more, I think that's how people are playing, and that's how everyone used to play back in the day. But I never did that. I never ran modules. I never played in modules. I always played in and ran homebrew stuff for the longest time. I think I started running my first module a little over a year ago with Tomb of Annihilation. And even that was super heavily homebrewed. My first real genuine, I'm running this module pretty much by the book, but with a little bit of twists here and there, is Waterdeep Dragon Heist that I'm running right now for this stream.
Well, Jeremy, you're doing a great job.
No, thank you. But, going outside your comfort zone, it can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be improving a crazy space adventure. It doesn't have to be doing something that is totally off the rails or unheard of. It can be running an established campaign setting that you've just never run before.
It could be a lot different of a skill set.
Yeah, it could be, all right, this adventure is going to take our players into the 9 hells for one session. Or this adventure is going to go to the plains of Bitopia, a plane of Bitopia, right? Or the Blessed Plains of Elysium, or Blessed Fields of Elysium, sorry. These outer planes are a great way to do some real wonky experimental stuff while not totally derailing you forever. You can just say, yep, all right, you guys are out of the weird outer planes now. Things are back to normal again. Let's not do that anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how to kind of mix things around a little bit. But there's another area in which you need to kind of learn to step out of your comfort zone. We were talking a little bit before about bad habits, Jeremy.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
These are... Bad habits are something, usually you don't realize that you have a bad habit until it's already pretty ingrained and it becomes pretty difficult for you to stop it, because ideally, if you did realize you were making the same mistake over and over again, you would have stopped it at the time. But eventually these things can just become kind of reflex, and they can be They can be very minor things. You might have a bad habit of when you're improvising, you might go into too much detail. Maybe in the effort to kind of overcompensate for the fact that you're improvising, you just start making up too many extraneous details that you're unable yourself to keep track of. There can be any number of like little ticks that you any number of little ticks that you have that kind of mess you up, and learning to kind of overcome those, and more importantly recognize that you're doing those things, can be difficult, but is really important to improving.
Yeah, and a big deal about that, right, is what's a bad habit for one group might not be too bad for others. A great example for that is something called the DMPC. This is a very, very common thing, especially among more inexperienced dungeon masters, where there is an NPC who pretty much becomes a party follower, who is basically just part of the party that's controlled by the dungeon master. And that in its own right there's nothing wrong with that. But doing that maturely and correctly is where the challenge comes in, and where it's a lot of dungeon masters struggle and have difficulty. A lot of the times you'll have dungeon masters that give their own DMPCs the best magic items. Wow, that's coincidental. It just happens to be a magic sword and my character's a paladin. Wow. Or bullshit will happen so their characters don't die. And the same thing can go for enemies too, right? If you have a big bad and you put them in a bad position and the players outsmart them and beat them, and then you save that big bad because of bullshit, that feels a lot of the time like you're really robbed of a victory as a player. And, it can feel really bad if your character feels like they're getting outclassed by a DMPC who is getting all the best magic items. And even if you're doing it fairly, a lot of the times it appears that you're giving special privilege to your own character. And that can be a huge problem. And certain groups have different issues than others with it. So it's important to consider.
And the real question there is, so you have this kind of bad habit of putting this DMPC in the party. How do you fix that? Because the thing about a bad habit is usually when you get into a pattern like that, it becomes something that is, especially if it's a storytelling point like that, like an NPC that's traveling with the party, it becomes ingrained into the fabric of the game, such that fixing it becomes difficult, or even in some ways breaks the continuity of your game. Like perhaps this DMPC that you've put in the game, you've recognized now that they're a little bit of a problem and that they're bringing down the fun level of the game for your other players, but you have no way to remove that DMPC in a logical sense. You can force it.
I love
if you're doing something that is going poorly, never preserve it for the sake of like what you're running and what you're doing in the continuity of your story. Just find, even if it's a little bit ham-fisted, a way to remove it from the game and make the game more fun again. Cut it off at the source.
100% agree. A lot of DMs fall into this, especially, again, I'm going to say especially new DMs, but a lot of very experienced dungeon masters. Like some of the best dungeon masters out there that you see on all sorts of different D&D streams or whatever run into this problem, where they do not want to break their story, their plot line, the thing that they're weaving. And what it comes down to is sometimes it's okay to do that, right? Like people saying, it's okay to break continuity if you need to. It's all right to be a little ham-fisted if you gotta, because that's what the game's about. It's not about weaving this grand tapestry, right? You're not painting the Mona Lisa with your game. You can make some cool abstract art, but you're not painting the Mona Lisa here. It's okay to be like, all right, hold up, we got to repaint this part. That doesn't mean totally retcon stuff, because a lot of the times that can hurt players and bother them. But it's all right to just say, yeah, the character leaves. The character gets a letter and they need to leave. And they're gone. And you just don't really make a big deal about it. It's like when a player character dies, right? And a new one joins the party. You know, there's a lot of like, well, why do we trust you? We haven't been adventuring with you for years, and you have no ties to the party. And oh, it's just convenient that you're a friendly face that we found here in the dungeon. But you don't do that a lot of the time. Like, you just kind of roll with it because it's like, hey, man, you're just our friend. You're playing the game with us. We're gonna overlook some of the extra scrutiny that our characters might actually give in like real life for the sake of it's a game and we want to have fun playing the game. Don't be afraid to be frank with your players about that and say like, yeah, so I've noticed that my 8th level samurai character who's been hanging out with you guys, Bob, is he's really outshining you guys because he's only level 3. So Bob, he got a letter from home, and he an animal messenger came out to him here in the middle of the forest where you guys have been traveling, and told him that he needed to go. His people needed him, so Bob left. Without a word in the night, he left a note, and that's goofy. Obviously, I just kind of took an exaggerated situation here, but you can do that, right? Like, if that is what's going to be the most fun, a moment of, all right, that kind of breaks continuity that you get over after 10 minutes when the session like starts and, oh shit, our first combat, or oh wow, an NPC to talk to, or oh whoa, we found a cave, immediately distracts them from it, and they don't care that the continuity was broken for 4 seconds at the beginning of the game. It's worth doing every time, I'd say, with very rare exception. Also, don't make it 8th level at the NPC, but that's an unrelated story here.
Yeah. I want to take point at a comment here from Eric Ehim, level 1. I like making DM mentor NPCs that travel with the party. They can be the person in distress if needed, or just there in rare instances to be the DM's voice to give a hint at direction if the players seem to be stuck. That is great. Absolutely. If you want to have that kind of thing and you're able to control it and make it kind of effective in the party, yeah, that's totally fine.
I completely agree.
Yeah, every game, in a lot of cases, having someone at any given moment, especially when the players are in an unfamiliar area, it's almost important to have some way for the DM to kind of feed information if it's like from an NPC traveling with them. And it's a tool that I think most DMs almost need to have in their quiver at places. You wander into a new city and you pick up the orphan who knows the streets, so we can kind of show them around and get the players acclimated to it and kind of tour them around the city and give them the idea. A lot of ways to make that great, and it's all just dependent on your campaign and what works with you and your party.
I completely agree. And continuing along Eric Him level 1's comment, we're just gonna call you Eric for now, Eric, because otherwise it's a bit of a mouthful. The latest one I have for the party is a bard who is chronicling their tale while also acting as a source of some knowledge skills, but that's about it. He doesn't get into combat ever and just hides whenever it happens. That is an awesome way to do it, is to just have a non-combat character. Great. If your party is a very social party, you can have them just be a very shy character, maybe, or maybe just not a very outgoing one. That's a great way to, if your party doesn't care about combat and needs a barbarian to just sit in the front with them, you can have your shy barbarian NPC who fills that role. It's okay to have combat NPCs in your party. Just make sure they don't conflict with what the party's doing. If there's a wizard in the party, don't have the party follower NPC be a comparable level wizard or sorcerer or something. But if there's no cleric in the party, a cleric party follower is great. Heals for days, son. Let's take it.
We picked up a peasant that has the healer feat.
Yeah, bard is almost always an excellent choice, whether you're going to do a combat NPC or not. Just because bards, like Eric was saying, right? They are great for skills. They fill in a lot of ability check gaps that the party might have. And I mean, chronicling their tale, that's just excellent. That just is a great way of being like, yeah, no, you are heroes in this land. And there's a party follower who's constantly reminding you of how awesome you are. Eric, I think you're level 2 now. You can remake your Twitch account.
That's funny. I think yeah, that almost feels like a player reward more than it does
Absolutely.
even an NPC. A bard that's telling them how good they are all the time. That's very fun. But I think we've covered
I
a
actually,
lot of.
I just
Go
wanted to
ahead,
make
Jeremy.
one last comment about Reflect Tonight there. A talented young cleric, a bit of healing, but always goes down in a hit. You see, having them be a liability, that's also kind of iffy. I wouldn't necessarily go that direction, but you can, right? Just keep in mind that if you make a party follower a liability, that could be very stressful for some players in the party. Other ones might not care at all. Like
Um,
Farfel 13, his character, Yuchunk, is probably not gonna care too much about a party follower who might die. Um, whereas other characters might really, be attached to these NPCs, and they just go down in one hit. That can be really scary. So be careful with making liability NPCs.
but
They
to
can work.
tie back into this idea of improving, if you're gonna make that like a liability character, maybe just try it, see how it goes, and if
Yeah,
the players start to get frustrated by it, um, you can just throw a wrench into the plan and change things up. It's all about that kind of like learning what works, learning what doesn't. So
they might
maybe
love
you
it.
can, yeah, maybe you can find a way to make this liability character really interesting and compelling. And if you can't, then you can also make a really interesting story about them improving and growing better as an adventurer, which is fun to watch. Um,
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I
so
just love the idea of like this very young, wizard or cleric, right? And there's an actual cleric in the party who's like a much higher level, and it's like, I will take you as my apprentice cleric. Which, like, that's a bit of a weird one. Wizards normally do that, but that's not the point. It could just be really cool. It can make a really interesting dynamic that you never really thought of because you didn't have the character, you didn't have the option there.
I think I was going to say, Jeremy, I was saying before, I think we kind of covered a lot of what it was that we wanted to talk about for this particular topic.
Absolutely, I
Um,
completely agree.
so that's how to improve as a DM. And another way to improve as a DM is to
It
ask
just keeps
be
going.
is be asked questions, which will bring us now to our segment Ask Pete and Jeremy, where you can ask us questions on our Discord server.
The segue was incredible. Uh, yeah, so just hop onto our Discord server. You can find links to that below the stream here. Scroll down to the Ask Pete and Jeremy channel and type in away.
And we got a few here. So let me read the first one here. Jeremy, I'm gonna do this set of three here. Team
Please hit
Coke,
me.
Coke or Pepsi?
I'm a Coke boy. Pepsi's
Uh,
just not.
I'm a Pepsi
Too syrupy.
boy. I'm a Pepsi boy because I kind of got it in my blood because I got family that work for Pepsi, and
Ooh.
also I think outside of, if I'm being frank, especially as a mixer, Coke definitely dunks on Pepsi.
Yeah.
But I think most of the tertiary and secondary drinks are better in Pepsi.
Well, I think for the most part, like both are not very good. They're both, I think, a little too thick for me, a little too rich. Anything made with like actual cane sugar is just crisper than the shitty fructose syrupy stuff they make.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not a big soda guy on the whole, anyway.
Yeah, so shrug emoji is what I'm gonna give you there.
Edward or Jacob?
I don't know. Edward comes first alphabetically.
Now, are we talking the book characters Edward or Jacob versus, or are we just asking Robert Pattinson versus Taylor Lautner? Because obviously the pick is, I think, Taylor Lautner there.
I think you just got two very different answers to that.
This is Jacob.
And this one's a joke.
Marvel or DC? I don't know if it's as much of a joke because I think the question is, I mean, it's cinematic universe. There's not even a contest. It's just Marvel dunks on DC. I grew up loving DC heroes, and every time a new DC movie comes out, I'm always just a little bit sad. I was never into Marvel as a kid, but as it stands, Marvel.
Eric him a level 2 in Discord. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that meme.
That's really
excellent.
Good. Welcome to the server.
Played. Yeah, and welcome, of course. Oh, Sword, doesn't matter. They both suck in both instances. I'm hoping that was at Edward or Jacob or Coke or Pepsi. Yikes, if that's at Marvel. Whew.
Marvel's
I love
crushing it 24/7. I'm
Oh,
so
yeah.
excited for Endgame, Jeremy.
Dude, it's going to be rad. The Forgotten One asks, what would be Bartholomew's favorite choice of music? And why is it DJ Boop and Ellie?
Because they have the stuff.
Nah, dude. It's not DJ Boop and Ellie. Sorry.
Who is it, Jeremy?
It's Disco. We have Bartholomew.
Oh, of course. How could I forget?
Bartholomew really loved the disco era, folks.
Yeah, Bartholomew had an era that he felt very kind of at peace with the world and really in tune with his environment. And it was, I guess, the 70s.
Yeah, when you're as old as Bartholomew and then the 70s roll around, that's a new lease on life. Crowley asks, I know Jeremy isn't a big fan of horror movies and books and such, but how do you feel about it, Pete? Do you have a favorite horror movie or book?
Ooh, that's a great question. Do I have a favorite? Well, for starters, I like the horror genre. My kind of taste in horror is, and I don't want to say, I guess it sounds kind of weird to say this, I like really good horror. Which is, it sounds obvious, but basically the movies I go for are kind of like the cream of the crop. I won't even touch a horror movie unless I already know that it's like considered a classic. It's the top of the line, so I don't watch a lot of like the bargain bin slashers or anything. I was a huge fan of Get Out, which came out very recently. I really liked A Quiet Place, which came out recently, which is kind of a sci-fi horror. I think it counts in the genre. I really love the original Psycho movie. It's very good. I remember The Shining. I was trying to come up with one. I'm a huge The Shining fan as well. I like all of those.
There you go. Game Master's Vault asks, how do dragons blow out their birthday cake candles?
Jeremy, do you want to take it?
I don't know. How do they do it? Is this a joke or?
I don't know if it's a joke set up.
It's a serious question.
I think I wasn't sure. My guess was that the logical fallacy there was because they breathe fire on their birthday cake candles, so they wouldn't be able to breathe them out. But I think the answer is they use their wings and beat heavy air upon them.
They just melt the candles really fast. Well, Game Master's Vault, I apologize if we've disappointed you with our incredible wit. Crowley asks, T Swift or Kanye? Oh man, Taylor Swift has a couple of pretty good beats. I like some T Swift, but I think Kanye is just a better overall performer.
Yeah, it's hard because again, these questions are surprisingly difficult for me, all of them, because T Swift, I don't like who Kanye is.
Yeah, I don't like how either of them are.
So if it's a person, the answer is T Swift. Yeah, I guess I'm not crazy about T Swift either, but I definitely
T Swift
over Kanye.
Barely
edges out Kanye by I think a lot, but Kanye is definitely a better musician.
Yeah, I agree. Pete, we're in agreement. Great work.
Yep.
Great work.
Yeah, good job out there. Good job out there. Reflect to 10-8. What do you do when your passion for a given game as both a GM and a player dries up? I have a fast answer personally, and that is I kind of stop playing it. As a GM, that might mean, I don't necessarily abandon it that day and I'll think about it and give it some time. But I will just kind of, phase it out, say, hey guys, I'm not really feeling it anymore. I want to give it a good ending and go out on a high note, but I'm probably going to stop and move on to something else.
I got two answers to that, and it depends on the kind of game. If this is like 2 months in, maybe like 5 or 6 sessions into like a new thing, I'll just be like, hey guys, it's just not working. I'm just not really feeling it. I don't know if I need a break from DMing. Maybe someone else wants to DM. Well, I kind of cool down, but it's just not flying. I'm just not feeling it. So that's option one. If you're very into it, I was 2.5 years into a campaign when I lost. I just wasn't feeling it. And it was because I was really considering, like, do I want to stop this? Do I want to keep going? And I talked to my players a lot, and eventually came to what I think is absolutely the right decision in the long run for me. And I'm so glad I did it. Is I looked at my plans, looked at the story, and said, all right, let's fast track everything. Let's just, it's end game now. Let's just go. Let's just take all of this middle stuff that was going to lead up to the end and cut 90% of it out and get to this ending sequence and play through that. And that ended up taking another like 8 months of playing. Yeah. Every week. Sometimes more than once a week. So it was a lot of content still in that end game. I mean, I had planned this out to be a very long game.
This was the recent campaign you ran?
Yeah, this was the most recent like big campaign that I finished.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll be honest, I really am very, very glad that I played. I would have been really sad if that game didn't get the ending that it ended up getting. And it sucked because there were a lot of weird things. There was a lot of player conflict, and just I wasn't super feeling it. But just pushing through that very slow moving middle section and just deciding like, no, we're gonna just speed through this part. I'm gonna just make things happen to make this go through. Worked, and it worked really well. And I think I would recommend that if you've invested a lot into as the kind of strategy to keep going. That being said, if you've got to pull out because like of emotional or social stuff, like if you suffer from depression or anything like that, and the game is not helping you, or anxiety and the game is not helping you, just you first. do what's good for you first. That's all I gotta say about that.
That's a great answer.
Eric Keyham, level 2, asks, do you have any thoughts on how one might make a D&D 5e? Advanced rules for people who'd love 5e to be a bit more crunchy.
My initial thoughts on this are, no, I don't really have any ideas for this, because I think that to a degree goes against the kind of spirit of what 5e is, which is to be very simple and accessible for new players. I feel like if you're going to make it more crunchy, you're better off making 6e or playing an earlier edition.
It's a little funky because of the way action economy is kind of built in 5e. And I think the great way to do that, if you want it to be a little more crunchy, is actually taking a couple of the systems that are very simplistic in 5e and iterating on those a little bit. Weapons are a great example of something that's super simplified in 5e. The weapons, it just doesn't matter. You have a D8 weapon, a D6 weapon, or a D4 weapon, and that's all. You have one of those, and it doesn't really matter, except for against skeletons, what weapon you have. I guess you could have a D12 weapon.
It's a good idea.
That's all that matters, and that's a great opportunity to really make. You can make 100 different unique weapons that do different things. Like this garrote. If you attack a character from surprise with a garrote, it is a D20 damage die. Or, whatever. You can come up with whatever you want. Or auto crits. Or what have you. Coming up with a lot of unique weapons is a great way to make that a lot crunchier. Magic items is another great way.
As I think a really simple and straightforward way to do that in a DM standpoint, like a mod that you could do, is just give more vulnerabilities to monsters.
Absolutely.
Just make more monsters that are weak or resistant to different things. You can even just put them on things, be like, oh yeah, zombies are in fact resistant to slashing. Doesn't matter why, it just adds a tactical element to fights really quickly. And
ice golems, yeah, they're vulnerable to piercing damage because you shatter them. And fire.
But they're resistant to lightning because the ice ignores it. Doesn't matter why. Just
right. Or they're super resistant to slashing damage
and if they take thunder damage, pieces of them will break off and come to life.
Like coming up with those unique kinds of monsters is another really great way. Yeah. And that I think is some of the most fun, right? Knowing that your party might have like thunder damage or fire damage that would be good against something like an ice, like literally an ice giant, not a frost giant, or an ice golem, and having it just be immune to a ton of stuff, and having it just have those couple vulnerabilities can make a really exciting, like, tense combat that feels crunchy and feels desperate until they figure it out. And having a lot of stuff like that could be what you're looking for.
Next question is from Crowley. Have either of you ever had to deal with anyone that still lives in the days of the Satanic Panic? Oh man, that felt really good. Satanic Panic. It feels very good to say. No, I have not.
Yeah, I have not either. There are certain things that just make me question my faith in humanity, and that is one of them.
Yeah, it's.
We're just gonna move on from there.
Have you ever read any Stephen King, Pete? I have not. I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of the stories. I've seen a lot of the movies based on Stephen King books. I've always wanted to dive into Pet Sematary. That seemed like one of the scariest jumping on points. Maybe someday.
Our next question comes from Dandarain Ninja, otherwise Basil Seiju in the chat. And they ask, what is your favorite Tim Burton movie? Pete, you want to take this one?
The first two that popped into my head instinctually were Edward Scissorhands and Nightmare Before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Edward Scissorhands. I'm probably going to go with that one.
So I am not a particularly cultured boy, so I've not seen a lot of Tim Burton films. I did, and I know this is a kind of an unpopular opinion, I liked 9.
I did as well.
I just really like the whole Enneagram kind of concept that played around that. That's very interesting to me. Obviously, Night Before Christmas is beautiful. I'm going to say 9, though, just to be funky.
I think there's some great world building in 9. I also really like Big Fish.
See, that's one I haven't seen. It's a shame.
Anyway, that's where...
The Sword asks, what's your favorite weapons?
In D&D or in real life?
Sword, I'm going to guess your favorite weapon might be a hammer.
Jeremy is named Sword. He obviously likes the other one, the mace. There we go. I couldn't think of another non-sword weapon, and so
well done, Pete.
Thank you.
I really like the flail. The flail is something that, like, I just dig. Just fucking cool.
To take a page out of Jeremy's book, I'm very partial to the whip. Not when used as an aggressive weapon, but as the more like grapply. My weapon is also good for like navigating my environment, kind of thing. The whip, in the sense that Indiana Jones uses it.
Indeed. Game Master's Vault. You find out you only have a few days to live, and you want to play in one last game. Who do you want to be the game master?
Well, if it's play in one last game, if it has to be play, because the answer, if I would want to GM my last game, but I mean, I'd want it to be Jeremy or James, one of my friends.
Thanks, Pete.
Much love. If I had to pick,
that was the right answer.
If I had to pick like a famous GM, I would really like to play in a Perkins game.
Yeah, I'd pick Chris Perkins. Sorry, Pete.
Fair enough.
I love Chris Perkins. He's an idol of mine, which is terrible. It's very unhealthy to have idols.
I don't think it is. Everyone's got a few. What is your favorite video game? Reflected 10-8 asks. Jeremy?
Also a very uncultured person. I don't play a lot of video games anymore. I used to play a ton back in the day. I mean, right now it's got to be Enter the Gungeon, right? I mean, I love Enter the.
Oh yeah, that seems right for you.
I mean, RimWorld is a beautiful game. I really, really enjoyed that. There is a really excellent game, actually. I enjoyed quite a bit when I played it. Nope. It's called This War of Mine.
Cool game.
It's a really cool game, actually, about like living in a war-torn society, and it's actually pretty cool. It's short, so it's a really easy, and I think it's cheap too. And some like 50% of their proceeds or whatever go to War Child, which is a cool charity to support.
That's awesome.
Children in war-torn areas, but it's a very good game too. I mean, there are a bunch of games I played that I've really liked, but right now it's Gungeon.
If I had to pick one video game, Super Mario 64.
Oh shit! Wait, we're talking about classic games. Oh no, I didn't even think about those.
This favorite video game. Super Mario 64 has got to be my favorite game of all time.
Yeah, I would need to really think more if I.
Hours and hours. The mechanics are just so tight. All the jumps and flips and spins feel so good.
Warcraft 3 was an incredible game at its time.
Yeah, I was thinking
The Witcher 3. No, The Witcher 3. I loved The Witcher 3. Fuck that. It's The Witcher 3.
I was thinking about
so good.
I was thinking about StarCraft. I was thinking about Minecraft. I was thinking about Pokemon Puzzle League. But that's a game that only I like.
I have not played Undertale, Adrian. I've not done it yet.
Undertale is so good too. In terms of story, Undertale's and music too. Undertale might be my number one game in those categories.
Was a really good game. Son of a bitch, there's a lot of real good games. No, it's The Witcher. It's The Witcher. I love The Witcher.
Our last question of the evening comes from Crowley. If you could play with any celebrity that you know plays D&D, who would you play with, and who would you want as a DM, excluding Perkins?
Bitch. All right. I would want to play with any celebrity that I know that plays D&D.
I think just for the fun of it. I think for the fun of it, we say celebrity excludes people that are celebrities from playing D&D.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know a lot of celebrities that play D&D.
Colbert would be a great one, I think.
Shit.
He would be a really fun one.
Yeah, he'd be pretty good. Actually, I don't know. Colbert might be too intense for me. I
would want to play Colbert with him.
I want Colbert to DM.
I want him to DM in a Lord of the Rings setting. Oh my god, that would be so good. Oh my! I just got really excited about that idea.
That would be pretty great.
Yeah, that's my pick.
Yeah, I think Colbert DM. That's it. That's the option. And celebrity I want to play with. I don't know. I think it'd be really cool to play with like the Big Show or something. I mean, I'm not really into wrestling, but from what I've seen a couple of those superstars play in some D&D games. They've been very, very entertaining. I mean, they're professional entertainers. So yeah. I think they're probably the pick.
And after Perkins, I mean, notable DM that I would like to play with would probably be Mercer. I'd probably want to play a game with Matt.
Yeah, I would love to play with Mercer. Yeah.
And I think that's going to. Man, I just had a weird deja vu. I think we've ended a different Ask Pete and Jeremy segment with that exact same kind of I would really like to play with Matt Mercer ending at some point because I just had the craziest.
Yeah, well, it's coming back. That's just how it is. Someday, guys. Someday we will play with you, Mr. Mercer.
Matt, hit us up on the text line. Thank you all very much for watching DnDTime Talks. As always, it's a lot of fun just hanging out and talking about D&D and also just other random stuff with us. A lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great every time. And hello, Zitrat. I didn't see you earlier. Hello. I'm sorry I missed you in the chat. Welcome. Albeit a bit late. Also, welcome to Eric Keham level 1. Thank you for your follow. We super appreciate everyone who comes by to hang out with us here on D&D Time. But thank you guys for taking a second to give us that follow or any other support that y'all give. It's incredible that you even spend your time here with us, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Pete, what other awesome stuff do we have throughout the week?
Thank you so much for asking me that, Jeremy. On Friday, we have Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time. It's a show that we host every Friday night here on Twitch where we play 5e with members of our community and chat here. So if you hung out tonight and watched our stream, you've now gained points towards playing in the game on Friday. So if you're interested, there's tons of information on our website about how to sign up and get involved with that. The games are always a lot of fun, and I recommend it. Like I said, linked below. Links to our website so you can figure out how all that works. But it's a lot of fun. And then on Sunday, tune into Waterdeep Dragon Heist, where Jeremy is taking us through the streets of Waterdeep.
Things are about to get spicy.
That is
But like
true.
legitimately this time in the first 5 minutes, things are going to be spicy.
I said that is true because you said it, but I guess I don't actually know if that's true. You could just be lying to me, Jeremy.
Being am I a liar?
We'll find out, I suppose.
I think I was just moving my eyebrows a lot, but I might have just been making weird facial expressions. I was trying to wiggle my eyebrows, if that's not what that was, guys.
You did pretty good. And that's all I think for. So it's a good emoji combination that Switch did there of Bartholomew getting chained. Thank you again, everyone, for hanging out, for talking about D&D stuff with us. We love you very much. I'm Pete.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is DnDTime Talks. Good night, everybody.
Good night.